Good morning and welcome to the Point. Just a couple of days before you head to the polls to decide if you will vote for or against Proposal 1, we'll do a bit of a review. Governor Rick Snyder and the chief opponent, Paul Mitchell, were both on To the Point over the past few weeks. We've taken parts of those shows, put them together, so you can hear what they have to say, both in favor and against Proposal 1, starting with Governor Rick Snyder and his assessment of Michigan roads.
No one likes our roads in Michigan. I mean, I've done hundreds of town halls, you know that, and I've asked the question, anyone like our roads in Michigan? I'm still looking for that person.
Right. That's not the problem. The problem is that it's been hard to get there after a legislature that was not able to come up with a plan for several of those sessions, then into the lame duck session. I want to talk about this. I want to go through this plan 101 because I was there. I know how they got there. I know why they got there. But let me tell you what people say to me.
Sure.
Rick, you talk to the governor all the time, and he's talked about roads for a long time. And he says it's going to take $1.2 billion to fix the roads. And then all of a sudden, when the deal finally comes out, there's a whole bunch of other stuff attached to it, and we don't ever remember hearing the governor talk about that stuff. So if you could, walk me through the provisions of this and why, from your perspective, those things that are included are important, because some people, as you have already heard, will say, just fix the roads, save all that other stuff for later.
And I appreciate that. And this was a good compromise. This was done by leaders of both parties, both chambers, and myself working together. And it's a good policy outcome. And when you stop and see, the first thing I'll share with people is quite often, this looks very complex, and there's some complexity to it, but it's actually simplifying our system. And that's the best way to enter this, is when you talk about, we need $1.2 billion for transportation. So let's start with where that comes from. Most of it would come from paying at the pump on the gas taxes that they pay. Currently in Michigan today, we have 19 cents per gallon. It's a flat amount. It's been that way since '97. The rest of what's going to taxes to the state is our retail sales tax. So we charge that 6% retail sales tax that you pay on other goods and services on fuel. And that's the issue, that what we want to do is make it so everything at the pump goes to transportation. So if we did that and we simply added another 23 cents, which is what we're talking about, it would make our gas prices too high if we left the retail sales tax. So this is where we're reducing complexity. We're saying, okay, let's make everything at the pump. It'll go from 19 to 42 cents. Let's remove the retail sales tax piece. Make that go away to keep our gas prices competitive, and 100% of what's paid at the pump goes to transportation. That's a good answer. Now the challenge is when you remove the retail sales tax, now you've created a hole in the budgets for schools and local government.
And about how much is that worth?
Yeah, that's worth, well, if you do the math, it's quite a bit of money in terms of, it's not $1.2 billion, but it's several hundreds of millions of dollars. So you created a hole in their budget. So how do you solve that? Well, the simplest way is to increase the sales tax. And what was done was to go from 6 to 7%. And when people asked, did the legislature walk away from their obligation? No, they actually had to do a 2/3 vote of both chambers to put it on the ballot. That's difficult to do. You know how hard that is, a 2/3 vote, Rick? So when you go for a 1 cent increase on the sales tax, you make the schools and local government whole, but in fact they end up with some additional resources. And this is to your point, where are those going? So if you walk through those pieces, the first piece is there's about $100 million extra going to local government. I don't view that as an issue at all because, in fact, we made some serious cuts back in 2011. So that $100 million roughly brings us back to even with where we were back in 2011 for local government. So that's really restoring something that had to disappear during the difficult budget years. The second piece is we're restoring a tax break in terms of giving a tax break to lower income people for about $260 million. The earned income tax credit will be restored. It was cut back in 2011, it would get restored. So another restoration. And in fact, that's important because with the retail sales tax going up, that tends to hit lower income people harder. So that's appropriate tax relief in my view. The one net new number that really is out there is really $300 million additional to the school aid fund. And it goes to the school aid fund, which again, if you think about it, most of us want to invest more in education. And it's for K-12, it's for community colleges. One area that's a key priority that I think we all agree on is career tech education and the need for the skilled trades. So it increases additional resources for that, which I've been doing in our budget anyway. I proposed the $35 million or more extra money just this last year for the skilled trades. So this is in the right direction we need to go to give us good, well-paying jobs for Michiganders.
I got an email from Brian this past week, and I don't know what Brian would think about $300 million more for education, though I assume that most people think that investing in education is a good thing. And an earned income tax credit, which is a good thing, particularly for working folks who are out there every day, just like all of us, but they're still at a level that that kind of tax relief can help them. Again, I'm not sure that people would disagree, but here's what Brian had a problem with. He said, if you want to fix the roads, I'm paraphrasing. If you want to fix the roads, fix the roads. If you want to do that other stuff, then do that other stuff. But why not separate them? Because some people are confused. Not because the plan is so confusing, you explained it quite clearly, but they're confused is why you had to do it all together. Now, I'm going to offer a suggestion with which you may disagree. You did it because politics is the art of the possible, and the deal that you could get in that lame duck session included all of this other stuff, and that's how you got to the 2/3 vote. And isn't that largely how this came about?
Yeah, well, that's part of good government, is people coming together. Again, there were very different perspectives going into that meeting, and there was compromise involved. Compromise is not a dirty word, and I think it was good legislation, and this is good policy. And that's why I appreciate the opportunity to walk through each piece, because if you walk through each piece, there's a good rationale for each piece that is a good answer for Michigan long term. So that's where I hope people do support it. Again, let's first and foremost focus in on safer roads. The $1.2 billion is critically important. The other pieces, in terms of how meaningful or how people feel them, varies dramatically. But in the end, this is good policy for Michigan. And there is not another option. Doing nothing would have been the very worst thing of all.
I want to come back to that because there's a commercial I want to talk to you about, but let's go back and go through this piece by piece. There is what we think of as a sales tax, that's 6% that we pay on every dollar at the pump. That will go away.
Yes.
Then the 19-cent tax that has been paid on, if you will, on the back end will move to the front end, to the retail. And how much will that grow?
That'll go to about 42 cents.
So that's going to increase the price of a gallon of gas by about 20 cents minus the 6% per dollar.
Yeah,
right?
which is within a nickel or so of roughly being equal. Again, the retail sales tax varies based on gas prices. So there'd be additional cost today, but if you use last year's average, it would be average gas prices. You wouldn't notice any difference, really.
So to the opponents of this that say taxes on gas and that gas prices per gallon are going to go up at least 40 cents per gallon, you would say they are wrong.
Right. Correct. That would be inaccurate.
All right. So now that's been moved to the wholesale side, but it has the flexibility of going up with on a certain percentile basis?
It will go up at cost of living.
Okay.
And so the good part is we're solving the problem that we had last time. In '97, when they did the 19 cents a gallon, it was a flat 19 cents. So it had no ability to change. And so what we've lost is a lot of buying power over the last 18 years or so. So if we would have done that back then, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion today.
All right. And so now the 6% that we take off of fuel will be backfilled by raising by an additional percentage point to 7% on all of the other things that are currently taxable under a sales or use tax. And that will make up the difference, plus a little bit, as you explained, and where that money's going to go. All right. So that's the deal that you could come up with, and that's the deal that you're asking people to vote for in May. This is emblematic of how you're asking them to vote, because you say that roads are a real safety matter. And the commercials for the yes folks get right down to the heart of it. And some people say it's a scare tactic, that they're really generating some fear. I mean, I got to tell you, when I saw the video of that windshield with that hole in it, it was frightening. Is that part of the motivation?
It's not about scaring people. It's about making sure everyone understands the situation and how serious it is. And I'll give you an illustration, Rick. This isn't something new. We've been talking about this. I've been talking about this for the last 2 or 3 years, since 2012. I did a special message talking about the need for this funding. But remember last year, I came out and visited 196 right near 131. We went underneath a bridge, and we were looking at the temporary supports they were having to do on that bridge. That's one of the busiest crossings in the state. And I can tell you, when I was underneath that bridge, I don't know if you remember, we had to put on the vest and a hard hat. I was happy to be wearing a hard hat. I'm serious. I mean, that was a case where it wasn't I wasn't trying to scare anyone, but you worry about these things when you're underneath some of these bridges.
When you look at the condition of Michigan roads and bridges, and at this point there's really not much point in arguing about how they got there, why we got there. It's disinvestment, it's whatever else it is. When you talk to people about the safety issue, There's obviously an economic issue, a business issue. There's all of that goes along with it too. Not to leave out the cost that it is on our vehicles, which we can talk about. Do you think it resonates enough for people to go out and vote to increase taxes on themselves, which is not a natural thing for people to do, I don't think, in a lot of ways, and turn out for an election that many people would otherwise just take a pass on, because this is a low turnout election?
Yeah, no, I think it'll still be a lower turnout election, but I think people will turn out, because if you stop and think about it, we start with that original premise. Everybody in Michigan hates our roads. And the question is why do you hate them so much? Well, a big chunk of that is the safety issue. And so hopefully that's a good motivator to say it's worth turning out, because isn't it better to get a solution? The other part people should keep in mind is this would be a job creator, not in terms of just the construction jobs, but this would help our economy long term. Better infrastructure does lead to more jobs. In addition to that is, you mentioned the repair cost issue. We pay more in repair costs because of road damage than the surrounding states by $80 to $100 and some dollars, depending on which state. That's a lot of money a year. And you can talk to a first person. How many people do you know had a blown tire or bent rim in the last year? That costs several $100s. Wouldn't you rather invest it in terms of better roads than having to pay it for repairs?
What does this cost per person? Do you have a breakdown?
Again, it's really the sales tax piece that most likely will affect people, so you can roughly look at it as the 1 cent increase on whatever your consumption is of goods in Michigan.
There is one point of view when it comes to Proposal 1, but there is a very different point of view from the opposition. You'll hear that when we come back to The Point. Welcome back to The Point. Proposal 1, it is a big package with a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of questions that you may still have. In a few minutes, I'm going to tell you where you can find those answers if they aren't included in today's show. In the first half of the program, you heard from the supporters in the person of Governor Rick Snyder. Now the opponents. Former congressional candidate Paul Mitchell talks about why he thinks this is just bad policy.
But as the ballot proposal passed the legislature, and I took some time over the holidays to look at it, in my opinion, it's the poster child for bad policy and bad politics. It's a $2 billion tax increase, that of which 40% of it is spent on things that are totally unrelated to transportation at all. And it's that way because they had to do that to secure votes to get it to the ballot. Which is the bad politics part of it. So, I mean, we're spending huge amounts of money, ransom literally, to get to where we need to fix our roads. It's not that I think our roads are great. I'm sure you don't either. You drive them a lot. It's that if we're going to pay for them, let's do the responsible thing and pay for them the right way. So as I looked at it, it doesn't matter to me whether it's supported by Republicans or Democrats. Sometimes it's just bad policy, and we need to say, no, let's stop and do the right thing. Your description of this as a bad plan and that there was ransom paid is one way to look at it. And you know what the folks on the other side say? They say, well, wait a minute. This was compromise. This is what people say that they want. They want people working together. So the compromise to get to the position that the people who wanted to fix roads was to compromise on things like $300 million on education, $260 million on the earned income tax credit. Those are the things you call ransom. So what's the difference between your ransom and their compromise? Let's talk about compromise, though. The House had a version of this that they passed, which was revenue neutral, no tax increases. Now, that may have had some flaws. It may not have been the best answer. The Senate had a version which was a $1.2 billion gas tax increase. They went to conference committee to compromise. The compromise they came out with is 58% more expensive to the citizens of the state in order to pay for all these other things. I mean, I was in private business 35 years. There's a lot of contracts I would have loved to be able to negotiate on the last night before we signed the contract. I bumped the price up 58%. That's not a compromise, that's a buy-off. And there's an important difference there. All the things that you're talking about financing with this additional money, they weren't parts of rational conversation where we're going to do this with the money, we needed to do this. No, it was done solely to secure votes. People pulled ideas out of the drawer and said, hey, we want to do this. If you do that, we'll give you our vote. Well, that's not compromise, that's just buying a vote.
When you look at where we are, a couple of weeks away from a vote, the vote essentially is largely to raise the sales tax from 6% to 7%, and then that triggers a whole litany of other things that are going to happen.
Well, there's 4 tax impacts. Right. You know, the sales tax being the larger, but there are 4 tax impacts. The increase from 6 to 7% is the equivalent of almost a 17% increase in sales tax. Those on the yes side like to talk about in other terms because it doesn't sound as much, but it's not Common Core math. You go from 6% to 7%, so 16.7% to be exact, increase in the sales tax. It impacts the fuel tax. The ballot proposal, the way it's worded, talks about a repeal of the sales tax on fuel. Well, I'm an old-fashioned boy. Repealing means it goes away. In this case, it's simply replaced with another tax by a different name and a different format. But it's 10 to 12 cents a gallon more at this point in time into the new plan, into Proposal 1 than it is now.
Okay, help me with this for just a minute. Okay,
Sure.
let's do this math on this. Current tax, gas tax, 19 cents a gallon, plus 6% of every dollar spent. So if gas is $2.50, that's what, 15 cents?
It's 16 cents now?
Yeah, something like that. So now you take the 6% off, and let's be clear that the proposal says that the 6% sales tax, or what will be a 7% sales tax if it passes, would no longer be charged against gasoline. So you take that part off.
For over-the-road vehicles.
That's right.
There's a whole other problem with that wording, but yeah.
Right, but for your car and my
Yes.
car, okay? So that part comes off, and so then you go to the wholesale tax, it's going to go up to around 41
42 cents.
41.
It is a full formula there, and it changes over time.
So if you took the tax today, that is somewhere in the neighborhood of what, 35 cents?
It's about 31 cents. It's going up 10 to 12 cents a gallon. Is the best, and the Mackinac Center is the one that did the numbers on it.
Okay, and so you go the other way, if it goes 40 cents. So is it really 10 or 12, or is it more like 5 or 6?
No, it's 10 or 12. I mean, Mackinac Center did it. A variety of folks, the House Fiscal Agency did the analysis as well, and came up with the same sets of numbers. And the reason it varies is because it's based on the wholesale cost of fuel at a point in time, and there's there's a cap and a floor on it. There's also an inflation adjustment on that. So over time, that tax is going to be adjusted for inflation, and that means it's going to go up over time. Here's what people need to realize about this proposal is all aspects of it are such that over time it starts at $2 billion and it'll go up. As our economy improves, as we buy more things, that increase in sales tax is in fact going to result in an increase in revenue to the state over and above the $2 billion. This is going to be the gift that keeps on giving, Rick. I mean, it's just people don't understand. It starts at $2 billion and goes up from there.
One of the things that we heard about for the last 3 years from Governor Snyder is that he thought, and the estimates that he had used, was that to put roads back into the shape that most of us believe they should be, it would be $1.2 billion by his estimates over the course of 10 years.
Sure.
Another aspect of this isn't a 10-year plan. There is no sunset on any of this, is there?
No, it's not.
So this is a sales tax increase that logically we could assume will be there for the long haul.
Oh, it's a constitutional amendment. That means it'll be there until there's some ballot proposal to change in the future. If there is, there aren't many taxes, you know, that go away. So in fact, it's something that citizens will be paying going forward. Michigan right now, the state and local tax burden on Michigan citizens right now puts Michigan at the 45th in the country. New York is the next higher state at 46. We pay a higher tax burden than most other states in the country. It's 22% above the national average for states in terms of that state and local tax burden. That's before Proposal 1. The highest in the country, which is 51 because they include the District of Columbia, is Illinois. Now, I'm not sure we want to aspire to be New York or Illinois in our tax system. We're working on it already, and that's before Proposal 1.
Well, let's talk about Proposal 1. And I said I'd go through this, and so I'm going to try to. We've talked about some elements of it.
Sure.
Increases sales tax from 6 to 7%.
Yep.
Takes the current 6% sales tax off the gasoline tax, moves the 19-cent tax to the wholesale level, indexes it for inflation, in other words, lets it rise, more than doubles the current tax on gas. That's just part of the taxation part of it.
You should do a chart of this.
Well, and we will. Actually, we're doing a special series that we'll be running. But it also raises some fees for heavier vehicles.
Yep.
It raises registration costs for electric vehicles. It does away with deduction.
Registration costs for our cars, too.
Right, it does away with a
Yep.
depreciation
Yep.
deduction for registration for our cars. Those are some of the basics
Yep.
that are involved.
Well, don't leave out the fact that we also lose the deduction on our federal taxes for our registration taxes we pay the states. So we're going to pay the federal government $100 million more in taxes, and so we can invest in our roads. The way they wrote it, they messed it up, and the long and the short is that it eliminates the deduction we currently enjoy on our taxes, our federal taxes on our registration fees we pay.
And you don't think that can be fixed? You don't think there's a fix for that?
There's promises to fix a lot of things. So there's a promise to reduce our tax rate too, our income tax rate, that hasn't happened. I don't know as I go with the old theory of the checks in the mail, okay?
All right, so that's kind of the basics of what this looks like. Now let's talk about the name of your group.
Okay.
Coalition gets higher taxes and special interest.
Special interest deals.
Okay, special interest deals. Where is the special interest deal in this? Because let me tell you what your opponents are going to say. When did schools become special interest? They get about $300 million out of this, right? Tax relief for lower earners. The earned income tax credit is about $260 million. Those are two of the bigger components. I realize there are other things. So what is it that
There's
you
revenue
see?
sharing, about $100 million revenue sharing.
So what is a special interest in that? Are those all special interests?
Well, this is a roads package. It was depicted as a roads package, and when on December 18th, it was a roads package. At 9 o'clock at night, it was a roads package, December 18th, and by 5:30 in the morning, it became a partridge in a pear tree, or a Christmas tree, I don't know what you want to call it. But if in fact we're talking about fixing our roads, let's fix our roads. Those things may have merit. The school aid fund, there's a variety of things that may have merit to talk about, but they weren't discussed in terms of, hey, we need this money to do this, to achieve this outcome. It was, give me this money, throw it in the pile, and you can have a vote. That's not public policy. That's an interesting approach to deal making. So frankly, they're all special interest deals when in fact the issue was fixing our roads, which is in fact the primary issue in the minds of voters. The number of people in talking with them said just fix our roads is pretty astonishing. That's why it's having as many problems as having in the polls, is that people just want the roads fixed and not all this other stuff. We talk about some of those other things, and they talk about money for education to protect our teachers in our classrooms. There's nothing in that proposal that guarantees that money is ever going to see a classroom. It goes to school aid fund. And from there, it can go to a variety of things, to teacher pensions. It can go to financing the cost of implementing Common Core, pick your thing. It'll be appropriated by the legislature. And the reality at that point in time is it can do a variety of things, not necessarily go anywhere near our classrooms. The earned income tax credit, they talk about that being some kind of answer to the impact of the sales tax increase on working families. Mackinac Centers and others have done analyses that say for many working families, it doesn't work. That in fact, the tax impact will be greater than the earned income tax credit. If you're a two-wage earner family that's on the lower end of the income spectrum, you'll pay more in the sales tax and the fuel tax than you're going to get the earned income tax credit. So a sales tax is a regressive tax. You can do all kinds of exemptions. It works out to be a regressive tax in almost every instance. It's a Band-Aid that doesn't work.
What is your analysis? Because I was reading the Mackinac Center's analysis that I actually just got in my hands. They talked about $475, $550 impact. What is your analysis? What do you believe it's going to cost the average taxpayer? Anderson
Economic Group did a detailed analysis of people in different spectrum, different scenarios, because the impact is what you make, what you spend, those types of things. So it can be a lot of different outcomes. I think the best one to look at is that a family that makes about $58,000 a year, which means that they're two-wage earners or one person working part-time job, 2 children, the impact on that family will be almost $700. I think it's $661 and change. This will be the net tax impact on them. Now, I grew up with 6 brothers and sisters. $700 is easily more than we spent on back-to-school clothes in the fall, okay? It's meaningful money. And at that point in time, we need to make sure that we're getting impact on that in terms of things that are important to the citizens. I've said repeatedly, this isn't about simply opposing Proposal 1. It's about expecting responsible things from our government.
So now you've heard part of the argument for and against, but if you still have questions, I'm going to tell you where you can go to get answers when we come back to the point. So Election Day is almost on us. Proposal 1 is a big deal. Whether it passes or fails, it will have a big impact on the state of Michigan. If you still have questions, I invite you to go to woodtv.com. Look over my series of special reports that aired all last week, and embedded inside, you'll find the Senate fiscal analysis of Prop 1. It answers all the questions about where the money is generated, where it goes, how it will be spent, and how much it could impact you. Of course, join us Tuesday for full election coverage, and next Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, Wood TV 8 for To the Point.